Let's see. Hi, everybody. We're going to give you a few minutes to hop on, or a few seconds, I should say. I don't want to give away any of Lindsay's precious time. She has a lot for you. So we'll get kicking here in just a minute.
Yeah, welcome everyone.
Hope you're all having a great week. End of August, crazy. Not ready for this. All right, we're kind of slowing down on participants. So I'm going to go ahead and get rolling here so we can get to all the good stuff. First off, thank you everybody for joining in. Let's see, I've got a chat already. Oh, yay. Hi, Angelina. Thank you for joining us today. We have a great webinar planned for you. My name is Christy Weeks. I am the Digital Media Manager for Harmony Foundation. And today our presentation, Whole Family Healing, Supporting Children Impacted by Substance Use, is presented by the fabulous Lindsay Chadwick. And she is with Hazelden Betty Ford Children's Program in Aurora. So a little bit about Harmony. We are a 43-acre campus nestled nice and tight up in the near the Rocky Mountain National Park in Estes Park. And we are a residential rehab that offers comprehensive treatment for adults and their family members. So we believe that the long-term recovery from alcohol and other drugs is possible. We have over 50 years of treating addiction, and we fostered a generation of long-term recovery for not only our clients, but for their families as well. This year, we are celebrating 52 years, so we're very proud of that. Our Harmony staff at all levels of the organization work together to create a very large community of recovery support. We do have a 70-bed program. We do offer an IOP program that is relatively new to us. So if you'd like any information about that, please feel free to check out our website, which is listed below at harmonyfoundationinc.com. If you have further questions, you can reach out to our admissions staff. They'd be happy to answer any of them. So a few things before we get started. This webinar will be recorded, and we will be putting it up on our website by end of day Friday. There will be an online evaluation at the end of the webinar. If by chance you happen to miss it, that is fine. When I send out certificates, I'll be sure to include the link so you can give your 2 cents back, which we certainly appreciate. We're always looking for feedback on our presenters, and we're also looking for some suggestions as to topics that you would like to hear us present on. You will get your certificate by email by end of day Friday, August 27th. If you just give me a little bit of time, I'll get those out to you. And if you do not receive it, or if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to the email address on the screen, cweeks@harmonyfoundationinc.com. I'll be happy to help you. Lindsay will be answering questions as we go, so I'll be keeping track of those, and we'll jump in when she takes a breath and have her answer some questions. And also, there was one other thing I was going to tell y'all. Oh yes, we do track this. So if you are on this webinar, you need to be active in it for 45 minutes in order to receive your certificate. If for some reason you need to jump off, I can give you a certificate of attendance, but it will not be the CEU certificate for the 45 minutes or longer. Again, any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I would absolutely want to say thank you to Hazelden Betty Ford's Children Program for their continued partnership with us. They have been around a long time, and we value the services that they provide. If you want to learn more about the program, please visit them at their website. I believe there's a link there. I'll put it in the chat box because I just realized that it's not written out there, so I can't repeat it, but I bet Lindsay could.
Yeah, it's just hazeldenbettyford.org/kids.
/kids. There we go. So I'll put that in the chat as well. And now to give Lindsay the credit she deserves, Lindsay is an MA LPC, has worked for the Hazelden Betty Ford Children's Program in Aurora, Colorado since 2008. She began working at HBFF after completing her undergraduate degree in sociology at Colorado State University. She completed her master's degree in couple and family therapy at the University of Colorado, Denver in 2013. Lindsay has over 12 years of experience working with children, adolescents, adults, couples, and families in individual and group settings. And I have heard her present on the fabulous programs that Hazelden offers, and I'm so excited that she's with us today. So Lindsay, with that, I'm going to turn everything over to you and we'll get rolling.
Thank you so much, Christy. And we love our partnership with Harmony as well. The work y'all do is awesome. The clients y'all have always have good things to say. So it is definitely mutual.
Thank you.
Pull this up here. All right, so I have kind of a lot in this presentation. It's only an hour. So just know this is a beginning, kind of an overview, just about supporting children impacted by substance use. I wanted to start a little bit just with my why. This is me with my pal Beamer. You can see him behind me. He's our mascot in our children's program. His mom and dad have addiction, and he helps kids learn through his story, and they relate to his story a lot. And when I was growing up, I related to his story. I grew up in a household with addiction and all over both sides of my family. So it was something that affected me a lot, and I didn't have the skills and tools that we teach in our program. And I wish I did have that when I was a kid. So it's really full circle for me to come back and be the person that kids need, that I needed when I was a kid. So this work is really special to me and really powerful. So thank you for allowing me to share it with you and share what we do. So some context about what the program is and where I'm coming from, where this information is coming from. We work with kids 7 to 12 and their caregivers who are impacted by addiction. Currently, we're providing virtual services. We will return to in-person as well, probably January 2022, who knows, we'll see. Currently, virtually, we offer weekly continuing care support for kids, teens, and caregivers. We have a stage 2 group, a follow-up group to our stage 1, and currently all virtual services are free, but even when we were taking donations and no child's ever turned away due to the inability to pay, which is something we're really proud of and really fits with our mission with removing obstacles so that kids can get the support they need, regardless of anything like money. That would be sad. So some things we're going to go over today: how addiction affects children, how to help children heal, looking at some caregiver support as well, and just how that aligns with some protective factors. And of course, I have resources for you all, because this is a group effort. There needs to be people everywhere helping kids who are impacted by addiction. I just want to talk about that scope of the problem. So there was a research study, the Bridget Grant study, that talked about 75% of adults in treatment for drug and alcohol addiction grew up in a family that struggled with addiction as well. So this is a generational problem. This is an ongoing issue. This affects everybody. It's an equal opportunity disease. Doesn't matter what you look like, where you come from, how much money you have, you might get addiction. So in knowing that, what we really try to do is just look that this is not just an issue for adults who need treatment. Kids need prevention work. If they had some of that prevention work, we are hoping we can lower some of that number of percentages of people in treatment. But just something to keep in mind, that this is a disease that rips through generations of families. So our goal, and hopefully your goal, is to break that intergenerational cycle and change that family legacy. So kids getting help is something that's really tough for sometimes certain grownups too. And sorry, I say grownups because I work with kids, so just deal with that. It's something really hard for them to admit sometimes, that the disease affects kids. We get calls all the time. Yes, I'm in treatment. I'm getting better from my disease, but I don't think my kids saw anything. I don't think they were affected. I don't think they know. It's much easier for adults to admit that they maybe have had a problem with drugs or alcohol before they want to admit that maybe kids were affected by it. And that comes from a good place of wanting to shelter their kids, not wanting to harm their kids. These are not bad parents. These are not bad people. But sometimes it's hard to realize that kids are being affected too. So we talk about that being the last piece of denial in the disease, is admitting that kids might need support through it. So it can be a difficult conversation to have with adults, like that, hey, your kiddos might need some support, but it's an important one, and we're going to get to why. So in our group, we give kids a lot of different ways to express themselves. Kids are sometimes more on the verbal side and can talk about things and have all kinds of things to say, but sometimes they're not as much on the verbal side, especially when it comes to those vulnerable feelings. So on the first day of our program, after a few hours getting to know each other and playing games and helping them feel like this is a safe place, we prompt them to draw a picture about how addiction hurt their family. And that's the only prompt. Kids that can interpret that however they want. There's no right or wrong way to do this. It's just about allowing them to express themselves. And I want to share some of those pictures with you because it's in their own words. This is what kids are saying. This is not what I'm saying I think happens for kids. And we want them to be able to have their voice heard, that their voice matters. So I'm going to share these with you. And just so you know, they're a little sad, a little tough. So please remember that we're going to talk about some of the hard stuff and we'll get to the hopeful stuff as well. But just so you know, they can be a little bit sad. So this is my first picture. In this picture, we've got this little girl sitting in her room looking very lonely and sad. Mom and dad are over here fighting. And when you look at this picture, I want you to think about what this little girl might be thinking. What is she feeling? There's no drugs or alcohol in this picture, as you will notice, but dad, I know this family, was struggling with a heroin addiction after an addiction to his pain pills after an accident, and it really quickly moved into intravenous drug use. She didn't know that. This is what she knew. And for her, there's a lot of different messages that might be happening for her. She looks pretty lonely. She's confused. Why are they fighting? Are they fighting about me? Who do I talk to? Where do I go? Is this my fault? Is there something I can do about it? She's not being told the truth. During the day, her parents are acting fine. And at night, they're fighting. And she can hear it, even though they probably are trying to hide what's happening in their family. The truth is they're not. She's very aware of it. And I chose this picture because fighting is one of the number one things that kids notice when a family is struggling with addiction. They oftentimes don't see the use. A lot of people use outside of the home or hide it or use at night. They don't want their kids to see that. And that makes a lot of sense. But at the same time, there are other things happening that kids are very aware of. And fighting is one of the number one things kids feel more comfortable about talking about as well. So when they're experiencing this fighting, there's a lot of tension going on. And kids experience that too. There's no way they can't know that something's wrong, right? And it's not just fighting between this little girl, her mom and dad were fighting, but her and her siblings would fight more. Her dad was fighting with her grandma. Aunts and uncles are weighing in on things, and there's just family fighting all over. And I think you've all noticed when drugs and alcohol are around, so is a lot more fighting. So it's an important thing to think about the ways that kids are being affected, even if they're not seeing the quote unquote use. And also this little girl, I just want to point out, showing this, I think she did a great job of kind of pointing out the loneliness and isolation that addiction causes as well. No one's talking about this stuff. She's not going to school the next day and talking to all her friends about, hey, do your parents fight every night? Things like that. It's just something that people feel very alone in as well. Our next picture. Another thing that kids experience, even if they're not always seeing that use, is broken promises. Broken promises can be really tough, and that can look a lot of different ways. Sometimes it's very, obvious of I'll be at your basketball game, and then they're not. But sometimes it can be little things of just I'll be there for you, and now I'm not, even if those promises aren't explicit. So in this picture, two little boys are at mom's house. They're waiting to go to their dad's house for the weekend or for the night, and saying, can't wait for dad to get here. Same here, bro. Meanwhile, what's dad doing? He's using drugs instead of spending time with them. And he didn't show up that day, like many days. Sometimes he does show up and he's a great dad and they have fun. Sometimes he doesn't, and they're confused and sad and lonely. And for these kiddos, do you think they felt very important? No. What's more important, me or the drugs or the alcohol? That's one of the things we hear from kids all the time. I think he'd rather be with his drugs than with us, because that's how it feels. I think my mom would rather be drinking than pick me up from school. We had one little girl. These broken promises create a lot of chaos, right? It's hard to know which dad am I going to get, which mom am I going to get. Not sure, because sometimes people are okay and sometimes they're not. We had a little girl share that one time she was at the mall with her friends, and her mom was supposed to pick her up, and her mom ended up drinking that day and didn't show up. She was like, all my friends were joking about how they were annoyed that their parents, made them clean their room. And it's like, I have to worry if my mom's going to be alive every day. And I just don't fit in with them. I don't connect. So some of those broken promises create a lot of self-esteem issues for kids. Am I enough? Am I important? Do you love me enough? And it's really hard for kids to not feel that way when that's kind of how the actions are speaking instead of the words. So broken promises, not only do they question their own self-worth, but just not sure who to trust, not sure what's going to happen. That feeling of like, I just don't know what's going to happen next is really scary for kids, really hard for them to understand and to deal with. And, definitely something that doesn't matter if they're seeing the use, they're definitely experiencing the effects of it. This last one's probably the toughest one. This is a little boy. His dad passed away due to his addiction. And this is the funeral that happened that he was at. And this is addiction up here in the corner. It says, my job here is done. And for this little boy, he lost his dad, which is really, really sad. We talk about this with kids to a certain extent, that people can and do die from addiction, but lots of people get better and don't. But we have to be real about it, because it's something that kids have experienced, might experience, and are already really scared about. So the more that they're afraid of this happening, it just makes sense to name it for them and give them a chance to talk about it. We had a really cool experience where this girl, she was like 16, and she wrote us that I'm doing some volunteer work for a school, and I would love to come volunteer for a group, because this had such an impactful experience for me when I was like 8 years old. And after she came through, she was volunteering, it was great. And I was kind of chatting with her, and I just was like, how have things been since you did the program? And she shared that her dad died. And she said, I actually took it pretty well. I knew it was good, that could be a possibility. I knew he was getting sick and he wasn't getting better. He wasn't working towards recovery. I knew that it wasn't my fault. I knew that it was okay to talk about, and that there was nothing I could really do to help him, that he had to help himself. And I learned all that from the program. And then she shared that she had an older sister who didn't go through the program, who didn't get some sort of intervention or help, and that she had a really hard time when dad died, struggling with all of those feelings of guilt and shame and confusion and anger. And not that this other little girl didn't have feelings, of course, but she'd really dealt with some of that piece of the addiction, and knowing that it wasn't her fault. Loss is something that happens. It can happen through death, of course, like I'm giving these two examples about, but it happens a lot of other ways. Kids lose homes, they lose friends. The chaos of addiction, people are moving a lot. They're losing things. They left their favorite toy at someone else's house because they're always staying with grandma or aunt or uncle or babysitters, or they're all, it's kind of an unpredictable environment a lot of the times. There's also people. We had one little boy, his dad had a couple girlfriends that he really attached to, who were really nice and important in his life. And, dad's addiction kind of pushed a lot of people away, and he lost those people too. So there's kind of that tangible loss and intangible loss that goes on for kids. And another big one is pets. We hear that all the time, that kids have to give up pets. And, even when mom and dad go to treatment, that can feel like loss for kids, especially if they don't understand why they're going there. So it's important to talk about these concepts and recognize them in kids, the things that they are experiencing, even if they think they're not. And one other thing I would throw out there is, even when people are home with addiction, are they really connecting with their kids? We hear all the time, well, mom is always smoking in the garage, or dad's always watching TV in the basement or up in his office, when they're probably using and trying to hide it from kids. Kids feel that loss, that separation as well. So there's a lot going on here. When families are in the chaos of addiction, Claudia Black coined the 3 family rules of addiction. And if you don't know Claudia Black, you should. She's amazing. A lot of her research is what our programming is based on. People are trying to survive, right? So the first rule kids learn is, and families learn is not to talk. You know, when that first family, the little girl, her parents are fighting at night, and then during the day they pretend like everything's fine. She learns pretty quickly, well, they're not talking about it. It must not be okay for me to talk about it. When a kid says something at school, they get in trouble maybe, or social services gets called. I talked and now my family's in trouble. It's how it feels. We know that's not always the case, but kids learn not to talk in a lot of different ways. They go up to their grown up, they see something's off, something's wrong. You know, mom, have you been crying? Are you upset? Are you okay? I'm fine. You know, how many times do adults say that to kids? So kids see that it's not okay to talk in a lot of different ways, and no one's talking about it, right? Like I said, you're not going to school and hearing about other people's family stories about what's happening behind closed doors. It's a secret. When I was a kid, I never brought it up to other people. I was embarrassed. I didn't think other families were going through that. I thought I was the only one, so I just didn't say anything. And that's true, I know, for a lot of other kiddos too. So if you can't talk about things, you know, and trust goes out the window as well. Like I talked about those broken promises, you know, what kind of dad am I going to get today? What kind of mom am I going to get today? Are they going to show up? I don't trust that they're going to do the things that they say they're going to do, which is a big problem for people struggling with addiction, of course, that things are chaotic. When you can't talk, you can't trust, and you're not sure, you know, sometimes kids are in those really tough situations, or maybe experiencing abuse and neglect. The person who is supposed to love me the most isn't really showing me that. So how do I know who's safe and who isn't? Kids are put in a lot of unsafe situations when addiction's around, and around a lot of unsafe people. And so it's really hard to know who to trust and who not to. Kids also learn quickly not to trust themselves. Like I think something's off, but everyone's saying that everything's okay. So I must be wrong. I don't, you know, I'm not good enough. I don't know what's happening. People are lying to me. I don't know what to think or what to say or what to do. So they lose trust in others and in themselves. When you can't talk, you can't trust, what do you do with all those feelings? Can't feel either. It's stuff, adult stuff, right? That's what we often say addiction's a feelings disease, of holding those feelings in and trying to use alcohol and drugs to numb them instead of letting them out. So when kids can't talk, trust, or feel, what we say is a hole in the soul forms, and they have to find something to fill that. And these are patterns that start, again, like I'm saying, as children. And as people grow up, that's when you know, they might come across drugs and alcohol, but there's other behaviors that we can recognize early that kids are trying to do to survive, to cope with things. And just how kids survive as they try to manage the chaos. Sharon Wegscheider Cruz wrote a really amazing book all the way back in 1981 that defined the family roles of survival. So another chance, hope, and health for the alcoholic family, which we obviously use person first language now, and would just call a family struggling with addiction or impacted by substance use. And I want to go through some of these roles because I think they're really helpful in looking at the behavior and how to help kids heal. We're not trying to put kids in boxes or diagnose or say anything like that. These roles are not concrete. Kids can go in and out of them, or, you know, move through them. It's more about the behavior that I'm looking at in understanding how kids are managing that chaos, which can be helpful with not reinforcing some of that so that they can learn to heal. And we're not trying to take it away from them. We're trying to find balance, right? And we'll get into that a little bit here. So the first one is the family hero. And this is the kid who's gonna, you know, very perfectionistic, gonna make everything okay in the family. Mom and dad are fighting. I'm gonna interrupt, or I'm gonna make sure the dinner is made so they don't have to fight about that. I'm gonna get perfect grades in school so that the attention's on me in a positive way and people don't have to worry about me. Everything's fine. If I'm okay, if it looks like everything's okay, then no one will ask me about what's going on. These are kids that, you know, are excel at everything and are trying to change that family legacy, and they really are. And that's not a negative thing that we have to take away from them, but we want to look at what are they really doing for themselves? Are they expressing feelings? No, definitely not. They definitely come from the early codependency camp of if you're okay, I'm okay kind of thing. Trying to make everyone else okay so that they can feel better, so they can relieve their own anxiety. So there's a lot of dangerous pieces to the family hero that we want to look at and help kids find balance. So like, yes, of course they want to get, good grades. That's totally great. And we can acknowledge that. But at the same point, are they perfection's a bar you're never going to reach? And how painful is that? These are kids that are absorbing all that pain and keeping it in. It's such an internal process. That might grow up to have an eating disorder or might grow up to have addiction themselves, just trying to relieve that, trying to have some fun. And maybe the only way they know how to have fun and let go is be under the influence of drugs and alcohol. So we really want to make sure that these behaviors don't get too reinforced. I personally identify with this role, and I'm sure a lot of you do too. It's something that you are always have to be busy. You never can sit down and be still, always have to be doing something and achieving. And really it's an impossible bar. It's an impossible goal to set. So if we have a kiddo like this in group, I'm not going to have them help me pass out snack, right? They're going to come up and want to look at me, look at this great thing I did. And I'm going to say, wow, I really care about your feelings. I'm most proud of you for sharing your feelings. I think let's do a painting and spill the paint all over the table too. Let's break the rules. Let's do something that's not color in the lines kind of thing, to kind of help kids see that mistakes are okay, that they are important on the inside for who they are and not their achievements. So it's important to look at these rules just in understanding how we can help them learn to find that balance, learn to focus on their own self-care and their own process, and know that they matter in a lot of ways that aren't just their survival mechanism. So next kid's the caregiver. This is the kiddo. It's usually an older sibling, not always, that they come in our group and they're tying their little brother's shoes. They're getting their little sister's backpack on. They're telling mom, okay, 3:15, that's when you got to be back here. And they're asking me, do you have lunch planned? My sister has a nut allergy, right? They're on top of everything. They're taking care of everybody. Kind of similar to the family hero, a lot of internal process going on. If you're okay, I'm okay. And while caregiving can be really great in some ways, maybe they do grow up to be in the helping profession. I bet a lot of you, if you don't work on this stuff, you might end up being a therapist. Just kidding, that's okay. But looking at, are you taking time for yourself? Are you, where else can you find value besides taking care of others? Who's taking care of you? Do you let people take care of you? And this is a role that, again, when a kiddo's coming through our group, also not going to let them help me out with things. I'll tell them what time things are happening. Maybe I'll write the schedule on the board, but I'm going to reinforce the message that I'm the adult. I'm going to take care of you. We got things planned. I already know about your sister's stuff. You can let go today. While you're with me, you get to be a kid and have fun. So that's what, a lot of both of these, all of these kiddos are missing out on fun, but that's what the caregiver role is really missing out on too, is having fun and being a kid and letting go. So that's something that we really want to help reinforce with kids. This is also a very parentified kid. This is the kid who comes in and doesn't really know how to have fun sometimes. Of no, I just want to make sure everything's okay. And if everyone else has got their swimming trunks on, maybe I'll put mine on and swim, but not till everyone else is taken care of. We go to the pool, by the way. That probably sounded weird if you didn't know that, but so we want to make sure that they're really getting those roles not reinforced too much. I'm not gonna. That happens in addiction, right? Oh, they have straight A's. I'm not worried about that kiddo. They take care of everything. They're so on top of stuff. I'm not worried about that kiddo. I'm worried about my kiddo who's throwing baseballs into windows. No, I'm just as worried about these kids than the other kids because they're not letting anything show. They don't want to have any cracks in their facade, right? So these kids often are the ones who don't get help, don't get attention, don't get any support because they make it look like everything's okay. The mascot is another kind of coping mechanism skill that, again, this is not just one kid. Kids can have all kinds of different coping mechanisms, but the mascot's everyone look at me, let's be funny, let's deal with humor. And of course, humor is a great coping mechanism, but if it's the only one they're using, that means they're not letting anything else out, right? These are the kids that might need a lot of attention. If the attention's on me, it's not on the chaos and the craziness that's going on in my family. It's not, there's no pain going on here. Let's just laugh. We don't want to feel the pain, right? So I have a little clown here. It's kind of like the how it might seem. You know, I think a lot of comedians also suffer with depression as well, right? Depression and anxiety. Even though they're the funniest person in the room at night, they might be the saddest. And that's when something we don't want kids to grow up with, thinking their only worth is being funny. That's the only way to let things out, or to, you know, getting all of that attention. Like, of course, that's great. Maybe they will grow up to be an awesome comedian. That would be fabulous. But at the same time, are they taking care of themselves? Are they letting things out? Are they, you know, getting attention for other things, that their feelings matter? So again, when this kid is coming in my group, of course, I'm going to let them put on a little talent show, but I'm also going to praise them for, you know, letting their feelings out. Wow, you are so funny, but I love how you can be serious when it really matters. I love how you could sit down with me and tell me about your feelings, because your feelings matter. That matters. I think you're funny, but I also like you when you're just being kind of casual. I like seeing that side of you. Things like that are really important for those mascot kiddos to hear. Two more here. This is the scapegoat. I picked this picture of Bart Simpson. I think he's kind of the perfect embodiment of the scapegoat. The scapegoat is the kiddo that is probably more angry, probably showing some of those feelings, maybe more so than any of the other kiddos. Honestly, even though they're getting in trouble more, and I think this might be one of the few types that at least they're trying to ask for support, right? They're saying something's wrong. I'm mad. They get in trouble a lot. They might be yellers and screamers. They're the ones that maybe have kind of a bad reputation in school, just like Bart Simpson kind of he liked to play pranks. He liked to stir the pot a little bit, but deep down, he was a really sweet kid, right? And on the show, we get to kind of see that. But it's important that we see kiddos that come into our group like that, those kids that are angry and, you know, breaking the rules and doing things that maybe aren't so healthy for making the best decisions with how they're expressing their anger and their feelings. At least they're expressing something. And I think that's something that we can acknowledge, and that they're trying to get for help. This is the kid who, you know, mom and dad are like, this is the one I'm worried about. And they come in and it's like, you know, they're the ones that are asking for support in some way, and often will get some support, but they also need that different support. We don't want to reinforce that you're a bad kid, that you break the rules, you do bad things. This is the kid I might ask to show a different side of themselves. Like, hey, can you help me pass out snack? Would you be my safety officer today? Can you let me know when it's 2:00? And thank you so much for you know, being my buddy, because they don't get a lot of those privileges sometimes. So trying to kind of break that rule for them, break that stigma, like, you're not a bad kid, you're a great kid, and you're angry and you're sad and you have feelings, and there's other ways that we can let those out. So let's work on that too. These kids know a little bit more how to have fun sometimes, but they also need just some of that support with knowing that they're a good kid deep down. We had a little boy in group who I think would kind of fit this category a little bit. He got really mad. We were playing hide and seek, and another kid found his hiding spot, and he got really, really mad and was kind of like huffing and puffing and kind of like punched a pillow. So one of my colleagues took him into her office, and she just kind of let him have his moment. And he like flipped over a chair, but did it like kind of carefully, and like was kind of throwing stuff around, kind of looking at her, being like, what are you going to do? Am I going to get in trouble? And she was really great about just like letting him have his moment. And she was like, what's going on, man? He just was like, it's really unfair that I got my spot got found, because my whole life is unfair. You know, all these other kids, they have their dads, and my dad died from his addiction, and I'm just still really angry about it. You know, he was able to just have that moment, instead of like getting in trouble right away for what he was doing. Like, she was able to recognize like, hey, something's going on for him. And like, this is telling me something. It's not just a kid being bad. So, you know, it's important to look at what these behaviors are really telling us. Last one's the lost child. These are the kids that also don't get support, have a lot of real internal conflict. These are kids that might, you know, kind of disappear in a good book. disappear in video games, but it's all about disappearing, being small. If all this chaos is going around, I don't want to make it worse, so I'm just going to hide. The world's better off without me. These are kids that will really struggle with suicidal ideation when they get older. Not that all of these kiddos won't, but if they don't have intervention, just feeling very unimportant, feeling like things are better without them, not recognizing that they contribute, that they matter. We have quite a few kiddos like this. It's always, I'll have a group of 10 kids, and at the end of the day, I try to look at it and say, who's the kiddo whose name I can't remember? Because that's the kid that I want to make sure I sit next to and talk to more the next day and connect with. It's hard sometimes to connect with the lost kid because that's kind of their MO of being safe. It's just staying quiet. With these kids, I might also really sit down with them. That might do better one-on-one, learn about their video games, learn about their books, learn about, whatever it is about them, learn about who they really are and talk about how awesome that is and give them some praise when they do something well and do something, even if they make a mistake or stand out for a minute, like, wow, I really love hearing your voice. I love when you share with me. I love hearing you talk. Like, you have so much to give to this world. So things like that are really important for those lost kiddos, and acknowledging them because they are good at hiding. All right, we talked a little bit about kind of some certain behaviors to look for and to kind of not reinforce, but help them find some balance with their coping mechanisms. But we want to really move in from that survival mode to thriving. So prevention research suggests that children need 3 critical things: age-appropriate information, skill building, and attachment to safe adults. So the way I kind of look at that is educate, listen, and play. That's how kids form connection. So when we're educating kiddos, we want to talk about that addiction's a disease, that it's not their fault, that their person is not a bad person. We talk a little bit about how that looks, that someone might need help for a long time with this, but people don't ask to get addiction. It just is something that happens when people start using alcohol and drugs to cover their feelings. And with that information, kids can learn why it's important. They need to let out their own feelings. So we give them some same language, stuck, trapped, and hooked. With hooked, we'll talk about like a fish that's swimming in the lake and gets a hook in its mouth, and the fisher person is now in charge of its life. And that's kind of how addiction is. When people have addiction, they're hooked and they are fighting for their life. This is a life and death disease. They are fighting for it. And so when that fish is fighting on this hook, are they able to take care of their baby fish? Are they able to show up to work? They're really going through something, and it helps kids have a little bit of empathy that my parents really struggling. It's not that they just don't want to show up or don't care. It's not that I'm not important. It's that they are really struggling with this pain. It's really important for kids to learn that it's not their fault. This is a message we really hammer in there the whole time of addiction is not your fault. You cannot cause it. Addiction starts, sometimes when people are really young, and it's something they grow up with. And the more a kid hears that, that's the number one message I want them to hear. This is not your fault, and there's nothing you can do about it. Kids are so egocentric. They just think the whole world revolves around them, right? And while that can be a good thing sometimes, they also take in all the bad stuff. This is all my fault. So the more that they hear that, the better. People who have addiction are not bad people, but sometimes they can do bad things. So bad things can happen. And this is a really easy way for kids to learn to tell on the disease and separate addiction from their loved one. If I asked a kid, tell me about the bad things your dad did, that would feel terrible for them. They were like, I don't want to tell on my dad. My dad isn't a bad person. But if I ask a kid, say, yeah, your dad is such a great person, and I know addiction has hurt you. How has addiction hurt you? Using that simple language flip is such an easy way for kids to learn to tell on the disease while still loving their parent. It's such a complicated feeling of, I love my mom so much, and sometimes I'm hurt by the things that happen when she's using drugs and alcohol. And that's okay to talk about and to separate. You can love your person and be mad at them or have feelings about it. Another huge important thing is you're not alone. I think I was sharing that earlier, that growing up, I thought I was the only kid who dealt with this kind of stuff, which comes with a lot of shame, embarrassment, and guilt, and confusion, and sadness of just not feeling like you can talk about it with anyone or anyone understands you. We have so many kids come through group one girl, she's being raised by her grandmother because her mom and dad both struggle with addiction. And she talks about like being the only kid at school that gets picked up by her grandma, and kids notice and say stuff sometimes like, why is your grandma always here? Where's your mom? And so for her, like, she just felt very like alone. And when she came to group, there was 2 other kiddos being raised by grandparents. She was like, wow, I can really be myself here. I don't have to explain everything and talk about, I never know who's okay to talk to about this stuff and who isn't. So for her, knowing she's not alone is just such a powerful thing. Giving some psychoeducation on talking about your feelings. Sometimes kids have a hard time even identifying feelings because it's a new skill for their family. So helping them with that. We talk with kids about self-care, how things they can do for fun, and things they can do that help them with their feelings. And kids' number one job is to have fun. And that's something that we're going to get to a little bit more. But so that's the education piece, right? So this listening piece is really just being there, letting kids talk in their own voice, letting them share their feelings, share on their own accord. This is something that's new for kids usually, if their family is just now getting into some kind of support and recovery. So something might need a lot of practice with just being heard. A lot of times kids are the first ones hurt and the last ones helped. So just a simple question: how has addiction hurt your family? Again, telling on the disease, not the person. Letting them know that you understand. I use self-disclosure with kiddos. Like, I grew up, my dad had a problem with drinking as well, so I kind of know how you feel. That's it. It's not about me or my story, but they know kind of that I get it. And they hear the other kids' stories too, which is really great, knowing that they're not alone and that they're understood. And we talk about a lot of different ways for kids to express feelings. Some kids are verbal. They'll sit and talk to you, usually the older kiddos. 12-year-old can say a lot of stuff. The 6 and 7-year-olds, they might need a little bit more help. That nonverbal age range, talking might work, but drawing is a great way for kids to express their feelings, as you saw in some of those pictures. Writing, maybe writing a story or a poem. That can be a true story, or maybe they want to do like a comic book about their experience. There's all kinds of different ways. And play is a great way for kids to express themselves as well, especially those younger. We don't work as much with the kids 6 and below, but I know play therapy is a really wonderful modality for those younger kids to be able to kind of play some things out and show you what's happening. And again, the power of the group is great when kids see other kids that are going through the same thing. The look on their faces is priceless. Hey, my mom had a problem too. I thought I was the only one. You get me. Let's be best friends. I've literally heard those words come out of kids' mouths. The group is an amazing thing for everybody. The opposite of addiction is connection, right? Kids deserve to have that community, to have that connection as well. So playing is really, really important. Like I said, with so much of the chaos that goes on with addiction and all the things we talked about earlier, play goes out the window sometimes. Kids having fun goes out the window sometimes. They're riddled with anxiety and sadness and worry and confusion. And so how do we get them back to just being kids? We want them to be able to have that childhood while they're still there, right? Instead of like me, I'm trying to do it now. And it's wonderful to work with kids because they can help with that. But a kid's number one job is to have fun. It's how kids do self-care, is by playing. It helps create safety with an adult. So if I have a client or a kiddo or group I'm working with, we want to play for like maybe the first hour we're spending time together, because that's how they're going to learn, like, okay, this person's interested in me. I feel important. They're not just sitting around asking me, staring at me, asking questions. No kid's going to tell me what's going on in their family if they don't trust and know who I am and know that I'm on their side. And that's how you do that, is play. It's kids play in places where they feel safe, and that's how they attach to people and places. So play is just such an important piece, and it gets downplayed, I think, by like parents and adults sometimes, like, oh, I don't have time. They're playing on their own. Like, no, if you spend some time with them, it's going to really matter in your relationship. So I just want to go a little quickly through this so we can get to some questions, but it's important to support caregivers as well in the family. And sometimes if this is the person who struggled with drugs and alcohol, great, if they're in recovery or working towards it. But if that person's not available, we don't want to wait for them to get sober for kids to get help. So any other caregiver is important. There's many studies that show just one caregiver can be enough for kiddos to have a different trajectory in their life. So how we do that, first thing, you are not a bad parent or caregiver. We got to look at those shame and guilt feelings. a lot of people come in, I've done these horrible things to my kids. And the truth is they've also done a lot right. And kids are not broken, they're resilient. Yes, is it sad they had to experience in their life, but we all have our burdens that we have to cross, right? So no, they're not a bad parent, they're not a bad caregiver. And just so you know, this is a feeling that is universal across caregivers, not just the ones who have struggled with drugs and alcohol. The other quote unquote parent or the other caregivers also feel those feelings of guilt and shame. So this is something everyone needs to hear. We give them the same language as the kiddos. We talked about stuck, hooked, and trapped, kind of giving those same metaphors so that their kids know that's something that they can use back and forth. We encourage open and honest communication. There's, obviously we're trying to break that don't talk rule in families, right? So how do you break that? You talk, answer the hard questions, talk about the hard stuff. Do kids need every little detail of a grown-up's addiction? No, but they can understand some things. It's okay for kids to know about addiction. It's okay for them to know about, someone going to jail, someone going to treatment. We have a lot of people who feel like they don't want to tell their kids the truth about that because they're trying to keep them from harm, but the truth is it's creating more harm sometimes. Kids deserve to know it's their life, they're being affected, and learning about addiction, learning about those kinds of things don't make them become more true. They actually help prevent. Talking about suicide doesn't cause suicide, it can help prevent it. So that's really kind of the same idea here. Talking about feelings, breaking that don't feel rule. How can we talk about this? How can we have great times to share, create some safety, create some ways for you to talk to, and that might be modeling feelings as well. I'm feeling really sad. I'm going to call your aunt and talk about it with her because she's another adult. You don't need to worry. I'm going to do some self-care. Showing them that you have feelings too, that you model how to doing self-care and taking care of them. So the kids don't have to take that on for you, but also you can show them how to do it. Consistency is huge. This is a really hard one sometimes for people in early recovery. But the more consistency that kids have, the better they're going to feel. And that's something that they can kind of work on, but really important for them to understand how that chaos and changing some of that's going to be helpful for kids and gaining trust. And learning to play with their kids too is so important, kind of like I was talked about. Some other support for grownups that they need to know, their self-care matters. Everything you put in front of your sobriety, you're going to lose. So by helping parents understand it's okay to go to your meetings, it's okay to go to treatment. Your kids would rather, every single kid I've ever asked this question, would you rather your mom be home with addiction or gone with treatment? They pick treatment every time. So it's important to help caregivers find that support. Letting them know they're also not alone. There are lots of other parents who and caregivers that understand where they're coming from, understand, parenting and recovery, supporting kiddos through this so they can have that community as well. It's okay to ask for help. A lot of times when people get into recovery, especially, they feel like, okay, I have to come home and be super dad. I have to be super mom now. I can't ask for help because they helped me so much during my addiction. I don't want to exhaust my resources. So that's the other piece, is connecting them to other resources, but letting them know it's okay to ask for help. And we kind of talked about this a little bit already, but addressing that shame and guilt. The other thing about coming home sometimes for treatment or either way, even if it's the other caregiver, is parenting with shame and guilt. Like, I feel so bad for what's happened. I'm going to let these kids get away with anything. And that doesn't help kids feel any more loved. They really need that structure. It's okay to have discipline and support. That's really what kids need, even though they definitely won't ask for it or say that. Shame and guilt can be really big factors for people parenting. And that also is a big factor in relapse. We've noticed a lot of grownups, once they have this kind of parenting support, can really be a relapse prevention tool, because parenting is hard, and coming home from treatment, your kids are crazy and you don't know what's going on. You're trying to just stay sober, and how do you deal with this? So while kids are not triggering, parenting can be, and so it's a big part of that relapse prevention as well. So this is a quick poem I want to go through about just encapsulates everything we've been talking about. It was written by Tyann Dayton, and it's called Children Learn What They Live. They live with parents who are high. They learn that people are unpredictable and unreliable. If they live with denial, they learn to mistrust what they feel and sense. They live with shame, they learn to hide who they really are. They live with rage, they learn to be afraid. With the emotional abuse, they learn to feel bad about who they are. They live with trauma, they learn to become anxious. They live with addiction, they learn to become people who are dependent on alcohol and drugs. but that can be flipped. If children live with recovery, they learn that people can change for the better. They live with parents who ask for help. They can learn to reach out for help too. They live with amends, they learn to forgive. They live with peace in the home, they learn to feel safe inside. They live with dependability, they learn to trust. They live with honesty, they learn to tell the truth. They live with emotional maturity, they're allowed to be children. So I love that poem just because it really shows the gift of recovery. And that doesn't necessarily mean the person who's using is in recovery, but just gifting that to kids and their family working towards something different can be so powerful. So this is just looking kind of what we've already been talking about. So I'm not going to go through all these given our time, but the 5 protective factors that help kids grow up and hopefully not go down the path of addiction and change that family legacy are social and emotional competence, talking about feelings, that kind of stuff. Social connections, having their own community, knowing they're not alone, concrete support in times of needs, groups, books, parenting classes, all kinds of different things that families might need. So we know it's not just addiction that's affecting families too. Knowledge of parenting and child development. Like I said, some parents also were never modeled parenting when they were growing up. So they're starting with a fresh slate. So might really need some connection for those kinds of things. And then again, caregiver resilience, encouraging caregivers to ask for help, to get support, to not try to do this on their own. Some real quick resources. NACOA is a wonderful website that has a lot of information. Our website has a ton of stuff. Also, I'm happy to be a resource. Please feel like you can reach out to me if you have questions, or one of my staff can help too. We have a really good resource network. SAMHSA, and something that a lot of people don't know about, Sesame Street Communities has a wonderful resource page for caregivers, for professionals and kids on how to talk not just about addiction, but about all kinds of different mental health subjects. So really cool free resource right there. A couple of books, I mentioned Claudia Black and the Sharon Wegschneider Cruz. Parenting, Positive Discipline for Parenting and Recovery by Jane Nelson is awesome. And Jerry Moe is the director of the Hazelden Betty Ford Children's Program, where I come from. And his book, Understanding Addiction Through a Child's Eyes, is amazing. And these are all like not textbooky, like very like good read books, not boring. So thank you for everything you're doing and being with kids and all your help with just community. Like I said, this is a group effort. Like we can't do this alone. So we reach out to each other, connect, because we can find ways to help support families and kids. So thank you all.
Perfect, Lindsay. Let's leave this slide up for a few minutes if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
Give people a chance to write that down. Quick, write all this down. It's good information. Great contact. Thank you, Lindsay, for that. If anybody has any questions, now's the time to ask. It was a pretty quiet group. I'm getting a lot of thank yous going on, Lindsay. So that's pretty awesome. Just a reminder to everybody that this was recorded. You will be able to access it Friday afternoon on our website, and I will include that link in your CEU. So I do have a question. It says, how much does it cost to participate in the children's program, and do you accept any insurances?
There is no cost. So we were accepting donations before. If a family wanted to donate to it, they could. And we also, we don't accept insurance, but it can be free. So it's free for most families. All of our virtual services are completely free right now, and will continue to be. In our other in-person program, like I said, is donation based. So it's only if families have the means and want to.
That's awesome. Do you have any specific resources for teens?
Yes, well, a couple of things. There are, I would suggest, the Hazelden has a family program that's open to the public. That's for kids 13 and up. We also have a support group, a weekly support group for teens. It's not really for the older teens. There's a lot of other things out there. Alateen can be a good resource for kids in their community. I have a lot of like books and stuff if you want to. There's one that's called I think it's called Different Like Me. That's really great for kids or for teenagers to read and kind of go through. Yeah.
Okay. So is this available for children in all states?
Yep, it is. The virtual programs is available to anyone, anywhere. We've even been working with kids. I had a little girl from Africa participate, which is really cool.
Wow.
So the virtual programs open to anyone and everyone. Our in-person programs are in Minnesota, Denver, and Rancho Mirage, California, which people are welcome to participate in if they can get there. Sometimes we can help with funding with that. So let us know if you've got a family that wants to do in person once those resume, but the virtual is open to everybody.
Perfect. Is there anything that would not allow a family or a kiddo to participate in your groups?
We assess for safety. So most kiddos, it's not usually an issue with the kiddos. Depending on their, if they had like a very severe, like intellectual disability, we might have to kind of assess to see if the group and the education format is helpful for them or not.
Okay.
But we've worked with a lot of kids with different, abilities and all that kind of stuff, as long as they're kind of able to sit through and learn that way. We will also assess, like if a kiddo is at home with an active person, we might want to try and talk to that family of like, we don't want them to feel like they have to keep their participation a secret. We've had a lot of grownups actually call and be like, oh, I don't want to tell my husband, I just want them to do it. I'm like, oh no, we're not going to be having your kiddos
Right.
keep this a secret from them. So
Right.
we try to just make sure it's the right timing for the family. Sometimes we have issues with divorced couples where if we need both families to sign off on it, but we can navigate those pretty well.
Okay. Couple more questions. Jill would like to know if you would comment a bit more about how the virtual sessions are conducted.
Absolutely. So they're two days, 3 hours each day. We go through our Beamer books, the little comic book I kind of mentioned at the beginning, and we read Beamer story and do an activity after each chapter. The main focus, again, you're not alone, identifying safe people, sharing feelings. So we also have fun activities, and we'll play games, things like that, so that kids aren't just sitting here listening, for 3 hours.
Right.
It's very interactive. Kids get a chance to share. We have up to 9 kids in a group virtually. They're mostly on Zoom. So it's about 6 hours total. Then we also have a separate group for caregivers that they can come to as well. That's a 3-hour group. And then Wednesday nights is our 1-hour support group. We do an activity. We all share a sunny and a cloudy, a happy feeling and a sadder feeling, kind of like that. So that's, and I'm
Okay.
happy to explain more if y'all have questions about that.
Yeah, it kind of follows in with the next question as, do all the groups start together and go through the program together versus just attending here and there? So it sounds like it's a 2-day initial program, and then the support groups kind of come in back behind.
Yep. So that's the 2-day initial. We call that stage 1. We offer that every weekend at different time zones. So kids can pick, or families can pick, a time that works for them. Then after that initial stage 1, they get invited to a stage 2 group that's kind of follow up on more skills and practice. And then they're also invited to our weekly support group, which they can attend as much or as little as they want. So we got a lot of kids that show up every week, but they can show up. It's an open group basically. And we have the same one for caregivers too.
Okay, and I am going to try and squeeze one more in. Sure. Alice Marie would like to know if you'll address the fine line between encouragement and cheerleading.
That's a good question.
Probably not a quick one.
Yeah, I think in general, I would say encouragement is really based off very real information. Like, and you worked really, something you can really see. If you're like, oh, you're so good at drawing, a lot of kids will be like, no, I'm not. I can see that I'm not, kind of thing. If you say, wow, you worked really hard on that. It's giving them encouragement for their effort, their behavior, as opposed to maybe cheerleading might be more based in kind of not reality, maybe to a certain degree of you're so good or you're the best. Like kids kind of know the truth sometimes, but
very general comments.
Yeah. So really focused on something very specific that you can see and kind of prove to them sometimes. It's helpful for those kids who don't accept praise very well of, you worked really hard on that, or I really loved that you did that. Like that was really brave. And I wouldn't have been able to do that when I was a kid. So I'm really impressed by you giving very specific compliments, I think, and praise that really matters and isn't just something you say to everybody. If it's specific to them, they're more likely to kind of take that in and believe it, as opposed to just kind of more general things that kids are like, they're smart, they know, like you say that to everybody. Like, no, I don't. That's how I would.
Lindsay, gosh, thank you so much for everything. And I love this group. I love this webinar group. They are such wonderful participators, and I appreciate each and every one of you that show up every month and support us. And we look forward to reconnecting again. Heads up, there will not be a September webinar this next month, simply because of scheduling issues. So we will reconvene in October, and I have a great one planned for you. So hang tight. Join me in October. Lindsay, thank you. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day. And if anybody has any further questions or needs more resources, you know how to get her. So hope everybody has a wonderful day, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Christy.
That can't get my mouse over to end it. There we go.